Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Elite City Podcast. Uh, Breaking news, it's about the media. It's going to be fun. So, without further ado, we have special guest Paul. Forget how many times he's been on the show, but you know him.
Yeah. 16 times now.
16th
Yes.
appearance.
It's wrestling. You can just make up a number and say
Right.
that's the thing, and everyone just has
it's
to.
a work.
There you
This
go.
is a worked podcast, not a
That's
shoot
right.
podcast.
Who would do such
Let me tell you
a thing?
something, brother.
So, who wants to start? Because we all have something to say. So we're just getting right into it, by the way, too.
Yeah, we've been wanting to do this for a while, and
Yes.
last week we were like very positive with our like predictions for AEW in the
Yes.
future, and now we're going to be less positive because
Very, very less positive.
because it's about. I don't want to start because I feel like I'm going to monopolize the conversation anyway, so I feel like someone else should start.
Okay, well, I'll start because I'm going to start with a question for everybody, and I'm going to shit all over WWE right off the bat. Do you think that purposely the wrestling media ended up the way that it did because WWE owned everything and the internet was so young that they were like, okay, we can 1000% control how this is going to go about, since they were the only game in town? Do you think that's why it ended up so bad like it is today?
I mean, them being the only game in town definitely didn't help.
Right, but do you think they purposefully were like, hey, let's make it so it's all about us? Like, it's going to be our way or no way. Like, it's not no ethics, no this, no that, no journalism. It's going to be a stupid wrestling thing. It's going to be just dumb, basically.
I think it's that no real media, like no real journalists or no real like reporters or news agencies want to associate with wrestling, so they just don't.
Yeah, I mean,
You don't get like you have like I don't know, CNN or something has like an entertainment reporter and a sports reporter. They like no one
that's
has,
true.
They don't cover wrestling because they don't want to.
Makes sense. I don't know. In my humble opinion, I just have a feeling that it was them. No, I have nothing to back that up. I just,
You
they're
blaming
awful.
WWE for everything is
Yes.
me blaming the Young Bucks and Chris Jericho for everything.
Well, I mean, come on. We all know how idiotic it is over there. And when the internet was so new, I mean, you can kind of mold it to your own little, I don't know. That's just my theory.
So my thinking about this is like, right, that at some point there was like wrestling journalism. It was just people going around and reporting on what matches occurred and the results of those matches, and like
Right.
reporting things like from a kayfabe standpoint. But so Josh, do you mean like from the time the WWE sort of basically took over,
Yeah,
became
like,
a wrestling monopoly?
yes, like
now things have gotten really completely out of hand in terms of
yeah, like
Okay.
that's what I was trying to, like, once they had control of everything, they said basically, hey, we might as well control that too. That was kind of my thought process. It's just going to be like one big corporate machine now, and anything that we can have our thumb in and anything that we can have a little bit of control over, we're going to. And it just seems the way that it's run there. So
I mean,
that's
they
why
definitely work. They definitely work through the media. Like the stuff that you get from them is on purpose. Like they
for
will
sure
promote themselves through their own purpose. But that's true for a lot of things. That's not just wrestling media.
true.
But wrestling media is especially bad.
Super bad. And it, like, to the point where it's almost like you can compare it to when if a serious movie has a funny line in it, like, it just doesn't fit. Wrestling media just doesn't fit. It's just bad.
I mean, I was thinking about this, and I mean, all media is worse now than it was, right?
True.
There's clickbait and there's Twitter feeds and there's random
Right.
fake news blogs. Like it's all worse than it was in the past. But wrestling's worse. Like, and I think it's because wrestling's it's still like a deep down it's a carny industry.
It is.
It's filled with
Mhm.
like if you were covering any other news, like we're all hockey fans. If you're a hockey
Right.
reporter and William Nylander's contract is expiring at the end of the season with the Leafs, you're good. Like the reporters are going to get William Nylander's side of the story. They're going to get the Leafs side of the story. They might get some other teams. They might get other play, but like all those people will tell their version of the news, but
True.
none of them are like trying to work the reporter, right? Like
True.
William Nylander is not going to say,
Mhm.
"I'm signing with Detroit," and then come out and sign with the Leaf, like to swerve everyone, right? Like that's
True.
not going to happen in any other industry. But in wrestling, like that definitely is. Like they're going to lie and say that they're injured and out for 6 months when really they're working.
True.
And I think that's unique
Mhm.
to wrestling. I don't think anyone else does that.
that is unique to wrestling. And the other thing that is unique to wrestling, that it's respected. Like if you run well, Rick, you used to work for the Pens blog. It was a small Pittsburgh Penguins blog. You guys still followed, even though you weren't media per se, you still followed like the ethics of a real media company. You didn't just like, yeah, you would throw your opinion in, but if you heard some dude on the street saying, yeah, it's time for so and so to go, you would be like, breaking news, there so and so's on the trading block. Like,
Right. Yeah.
but with
I mean,
wrestling,
that's a huge problem with it. Like there's no
right,
for wrestling, there's no standard, and there's no like a lot of these guys, a lot of even the biggest of wrestling media, like the Dave Meltzers, they're not working for anyone other than themselves, right? He started his own
correct,
newsletter and did his own thing, and like he's decides what he wants to do for himself. Like with most other media,
right,
like, oh, this guy's telling the truth because he's a reporter for CNN or the New York Times or whoever, right?
Mhm.
Like
right.
he's a real journalist. And if that guy is constantly wrong and constantly lies, like CNN will not want him on their show anymore, on their channel anymore. But Dave Meltzer doesn't have that. He can
Right.
he runs his own thing. He can say whatever he wants, and there's no standard, and there's no one tracking to be like, oh, he was actually wrong 80% of the time last year. Like no one does that. He just says and does whatever he wants.
That would be an interesting stat to seriously track everything that they reported for 1 year and literally see how awful or how good it is. Seriously.
I mean, it's
Well,
hard
doesn't
no, go ahead.
doesn't cage side seats do that like every week? Like they're like,
Yeah, they do like a rumor roundup of stuff that happened.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that's as far as it goes. It's never Meltzer said this in March, and it was proven to be completely false. It's
I
like,
think the
well,
biggest problem with it is they never report anything, right? Meltzer doesn't say. I
That's
think
true,
Jay
too.
White. I'm not even. He doesn't say. I think he doesn't say Jay White is going to sign with WWE, and then you can point back to that when he
Mhm.
signs with AEW and say, hey, he was wrong. He
Right.
says, oh, there's a general feeling backstage from a lot of people
Mhm.
that are thinking that there's a really good likelihood of Jay White signing with WWE. And then he doesn't, and he goes, hey, I didn't say that he would. I just said some people backstage thought that he might possibly, potentially
Yeah.
at some point. Like,
And see, that's where me as a fan would like to know who you were talking to and why you continue to talk to them on a serious level. Like, okay, well, they gave you false information. Out them. Say, hey, this is their name. This is what they told me. I don't know why they lied to me, but put them on the block. It makes you look better.
yeah, I don't think they care about that. They just care about what you talked about.
Yeah.
Well, again, that's half the battle too. As long as people were saying your name, that's, I forget the analogy, but or any publicity is good publicity. So I guess as long as people were talking and using Meltzer's name, that's all he cares about. So I guess as far as a branding thing, it makes sense.
I think it's like what Rick's just said. Like, part of it is there is no integrity. There is no ethics in wrestling
True.
journalism, right? And I was thinking too, like with sports journalism or any other kind of journalism, if you have a source, you credit the source. You won't necessarily name the source, but you'll say, my sources have said this. And there is a gamemanship too. Like even if William Nylander is like, well, I got to take it one day at a time. And like there's the performative aspect of the interview that athletes and politicians do. I think there's another element here that I think people are really terrible at understanding that an answer or reporting is partly performative. Like the thing where someone might say, well, Joe Biden didn't say this. And so people will react on social media of, well, Joe Biden clearly doesn't feel this way. But if you're wise to the game, right, you know that a politician isn't going to say like, yeah, we should bomb Canada, right? Well, some politicians might say that, but
right.
You know, like they're going to say like something, they're saying something publicly that isn't actually reflective of what they're actually thinking or what they're doing. And then you have like wrestling journalism, which is so locked into the con and performance of wrestling itself. And then the fans are, I don't know, like they're treating something that's not real as real in the same way that people, if that makes any sense. Like the people
Right.
that don't understand a politician can't come out and say like, yeah, screw Mississippi.
Right.
You know, but like
Right.
at the same time, well, we have concerns about what's happening in Mississippi.
Right.
And it's like this perfect storm of people being swindled, but also not realizing they're being marks in a very different fashion. It's like the realism of wrestling that they're not getting, it's not real, if that makes any sense.
And I think the wrestlers are more likely to just obviously lie, as far as I could tell. Like when we're talking about athletes, like a player on a team might say, "Oh, I love playing in X city. It's the greatest city and the greatest fans, and I've had a wonderful time here." And then they'll sign with someone else next week. Like that's
right.
That's because he's not going to say, "Oh yes, that team sucked. I hate it. I'm going to where more money is." Like he's not going to say that.
Mm-hmm.
But a wrestler or someone backstage is not only going to say, "Oh, I love WWE. I'd never go anywhere else," and then sign with AEW, but they're going to purposely talk about how good WWE is extra to swerve you into being surprised when they show up in AEW, right? Like they're trying to lie as opposed to just trying to hold back the truth.
And like we can't forget that there's literally only 2 teams in town. You know, it's not like a whole league, like, you know, so it's like, oh, if you're on AEW's roster, of course you like them, because if not, they're going to fire you. Then you're going to have a bad reputation and the other place isn't going to hire you, you know? So with unless you're CM Punk, but he's not there to make friends, only to make money. Sorry. I said that with more passion than him.
Well, the CM Punk thing is like a really good, like this recent thing with him going to not like the last 2 years of insanity with CM Punk, like the right. recent him going to WWE.
Right.
It's a good like case study for how bad wrestling journalism actually is, and how quickly they are to like pretend that no, they never said that, and they said this all along. Like when he returned. And I don't know if either of you saw his return at Survivor Series. Like Seth Rollins was on the ramp, like he was on the ramp, and Seth Rollins was near the ring, like screaming at him. And the media report, like Sean Ross Sapp and all them, reported that as like, oh, Seth Rollins was outraged that CM Punk was back, and people were like, no, he's on TV, he's pretending, right? But they reported that as like, oh, that's real, like he's actually upset that CM Punk came back, as if somehow CM Punk would come back, he would have no idea. And he would be so upset about it that he would have to just scream on live television. Like,
or was it Sean Ross Sapp too that was like backtracking faster than a backtracking machine? I had
yeah, no one's ever backtracked that fast. He was just like, no one's not coming, and then which was like, oh, he fell for the whole, oh, he signed his contract like when he walked into the building that day. They were negotiating down to the hour. Yeah. And then like Meltzer reported that like, oh no, he's been trying to get a WWE contract for like 6 months or something, right? Like it that he was signed. Like they had a t-shirt ready for him.
Yes. Yeah.
For the show. And Sean Ross Sapp was still like, no one else in the company knew other than Triple H. I'm like, really? No one else in the company knew? You had a shirt prepared. You played his theme song. He had an entrance video.
Right.
You didn't fade to black after the show. Like all these people knew, like clearly. And Sean Ross Sapp was still trying to cover himself to be like, oh, nobody knew. Not a single person. No, nobody told you. It's not that nobody knew. It's that he didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And see that goes back to like the internet and just clickbait stuff, because that's all they want. It doesn't matter what they're saying. It just matters that you're a subscriber or a Patreon or whatever. And that's all that matters to them. At the end of the month, as long as your check clears, they don't care.
Right.
Mhm.
So like there's that aspect of it too. Like, should the people that are paying be more critical? Like, hey, look, I'm giving you money, and first off, I don't know why people continue to give them money, because their daily reports are on the internet about 9 seconds after they're posted, and people give them $10 a month for that. So that's beyond me, but whatever. Like, if I'm giving someone money and over and over again, you're just giving me smoke and mirrors, or being, giving me double speech and vague talk, like, I'm going to take my money back because I'm not learning anything. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Definitely the audience, the wrestling audience, is a part of the problem.
yeah, because
Mhm.
we're not a monetized podcast or anything, but if people were giving us $10 a month for me to just sit here and talk for a couple hours, like, I ain't gonna complain. Like, like, so yeah, until the people are like, look, either give me a little bit more of journalistic integrity, or admit when you're wrong, or B, like, hey, I was given some false information, sorry, next time I'll try to do better. Like, at least be a little, don't like little SRS, don't backtrack until you look like a fool again.
Yeah.
Because there's only so much you can do. Like, it's just it's so frustrating. Okay.
It definitely is. And with the problem is not only do they have like websites and Twitter feeds, like there's no, like we've said, there's no like New York Times or whatever of wrestling journalism that you can go
Right.
to as the trusted source. But also, they're not just public. Dave Meltzer isn't just publishing a newsletter or a blog post. Sean Ross Sapp isn't just doing like a daily news update on his website. They're also like tweeting all the time. But then they also,
Right.
all of them have like podcasts and live streams and whatever that they're just trying to fill time, right? They have an hour-long live stream after Raw, an hour-long live stream after Dynamite. Like, they have to do something on those shows. So then you get stuff like the stuff recently that happened with talking about Sasha Banks, Mercedes, where Sean Ross Sapp was just like, oh, I have a feeling that she's more likely to sign with WWE today than she was in August. Okay, it's possible.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah, you have a feeling that, okay, it's perfectly legitimate. But then every other website and every other Twitter feed and every other person publishes Sean Ross Sapp says that Sasha Banks is more likely to come back to WWE, and then there's no report to source. Like, usually you can say, CNN said this, and someone will link to the link on CNN's website that said this, or the tweet that said this specific thing. But like Sean Ross Sapp's thing is just a comment he made in the middle of like an hour-long live stream. So there's no source to link to. So everyone else who just reads it as Sean Ross Sapp says, eventually that becomes Sean Ross Sapp reported, and he never reported anything.
Right. And that comes down to, again, blogs and vlogs and podcasts our size doing that.
Right.
It rolls downhill. And if like, we're not responsible, because Sean Ross Sapp, Dave Meltzer, they have names in that industry. So if you attach their name to a sentence, all of a sudden it has clout. So yeah, like, people need to be careful on how they report on a report too.
And
if
also,
that
like,
makes sense.
Once in a while, Sean Ross Sapp will tweet, like, if someone says Fightful says, WWE is going to be disbanded and taken apart, he'll retweet that with like, no, we didn't say that. Okay, that's good. He should do that.
Right.
But when there's a million reports saying Sean Ross Sapp says Mercedes is signing with WWE, he doesn't like come out and refute that, right? He never says, no, I never reported that, which he should, because technically, if there were standards in journalism, they would be making him look bad.
Yeah.
But like if a bunch of people were saying, CNN says this, CNN would be like, no, we didn't say that.
Right.
But he doesn't do that, and Meltzer doesn't do that. They're just happy that people are talking about them.
Yeah. It's so frustrating. It's like I'm so like 84 million thoughts just want to come out at once.
Like Rick messaged me this today that, and I don't know if we're gonna talk about this, but this seems like a good example of it.
Yeah.
Like there's a report from was it from Meltzer about negativity at AEW?
Yeah, it was like Meltzer and Brian Alvarez have like a podcast or a
Yeah.
live stream or something. They were talking on that.
Yeah, and it's something. It started with like someone got fired that was based out of Nashville that was editing
Right.
AEW programming, and allegedly, according to Meltzer, there's negativity behind the scenes. That people feel like the product's going in a different direction, and Rick's point was like this is exactly the sort of thing that is a nothing burger in terms of a story per se, right? And
Yeah.
but it's going to like start the cycle again of people like reading between the lines and misreporting and misretweeting and misrepresenting what the original story is, and it's aggravating, and it makes me want to rip my hair out.
You're right when you talk about a cycle, because remember when Punk was still in AEW and after a
Mhm.
show he said that thing about like the Hangman Page action figure not selling well or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then suddenly Sean Ross Sapp and Meltzer had all of these stories about, oh yeah, here's 5 other times that in the last month that Punk did something that nobody liked. Like, well, if you knew that, why did you all wait until right now to say, oh yeah, there's been several other issues? Like if you knew that those issues existed and didn't say anything about it because you, for whatever reason, thought it wasn't worth talking about, or when Punk said that and there was some heat on him for that, you had a bunch of wrestlers running to you going, oh yeah, also there was a bunch of other problems. And then you're not reporting as much as you're just like retweeting people's grievances, essentially, right? Like that's not news necessarily. That's just like, oh yeah, by the way, he didn't say hi to me backstage too. Like I'm mad about that. There are none of those, like, why are you, if you didn't think it was worthwhile to share until it became a thing, why are you sharing it now is what I'm getting to.
Well, it's like rumor mongering, right? It's like, and not even rumor mongering. It's like somebody says something about somebody you don't like, and you're like, oh yeah, by the way, 5 years ago we went out to dinner and they didn't, and it's so ludicrous, right? And why are you sitting on this information?
Yeah.
Because it's the cycle. The cycle has to be keep getting fed, and like listen, I'm not defending CM Punk per se, but like it seemed like everybody, he could have like said something so banal and somebody would be like, oh yeah, exactly the time in Ring of Honor in 2006 he said the exact same thing to me.
Right. Yeah. I don't, like, again, I'm not defending how he reacted or acted or attacked anybody, or obviously,
Right.
but the pile on that came from media and sources, like if that happened to anyone, like to any athlete, like it happens. I'm in Toronto, and the Leafs.
I was just gonna say
the Leafs get piled on constantly for everything all the time. Like Toronto media is horrible for sports media. So like the Leafs don't do well, and suddenly they're like, oh yeah, this guy also didn't. I saw he didn't go to practice, and also I think he got in an argument with his teammates, and like they pile on like that. When that kind of stuff happens, players don't want to play here because they're like, I don't want to like go out to dinner and order fries and then have it be on the front page of some website that like I'm eating fries
like hypothetically someone who likes hot dogs.
I was just gonna say that.
Yes. Yeah. If someone say liked hot dogs and then what, I don't want to go in depth with that story because it's not related, but we know where Phil Kessel lived when he lived in Toronto. It's relatively common knowledge. And we know where the arena is, obviously. Where he apparently walked every day to get hot dogs was like a 25-minute walk. If he was walking 25 minutes to get a hot dog and then walking 25 minutes back to the that's fine. Go ahead. No problem.
I wouldn't have cared if he walked 27 steps to get hot dogs. If he kept producing the numbers that he was producing, there's nothing to complain about.
So, I mean, this stuff does exist in other media.
Yeah.
Like you'll find like a player gets traded off a team. Boston media is notorious for this. Like a player gets traded off the team and suddenly you get a bunch of Boston reporters being like, oh yeah, he never got along with his teammates backstage. Like if you knew that before, why did you wait until he got traded
Mhm.
to say that publicly? So like it happens everywhere. I just think all the ills of that exist in all media, they're amplified so much in wrestling media.
Yeah.
All of them.
Everyone. Yeah. It's
Mhm.
the thing that irks me the most with this whole situation is like just like companies, there's basically, I mean, we keep saying the same names over and over again for a reason, because there's only like 3 people. But my question to you guys, because I don't necessarily follow them per se, does Busted Open have a better reputation?
I'm not sure. I don't know if they actually report or anything, or if
Ooh.
they just talk about stuff.
Oh, okay. See, like I said,
I don't know enough about them to know.
Same here, but I just had that.
Is there anyone like is there anyone who has like any outlet or person or who has a pretty good reputation in wrestling media?
Uh,
I mean, you could say what you want about him, but I mean, the Cornette podcast does well. That's not necessarily, I guess you could consider that media, but as far as news,
in terms of like, yeah, in terms of
it's
news,
like
like in terms
news.
of reporting, is there anyone who's actually good? Sean Ross Sapp did try, I think, at the beginning at least. I think he did try to be media. Like he would not report something unless 2 sources told it to him. Like he said that publicly before, and he wouldn't, you know, share private conversations unless they were told to be on the record or whatever. But then I think the quest for attention and subscriptions just gets to you.
Right.
You're just like, oh, I could just make stuff up and it's easier.
Yeah, I'm trying to think on like wrestling media, and I can't like.
Well, I don't know if he still does it, but Sean Ross Sapp has in his bio not a journalist, as if that makes it okay to just not have standards.
Yeah,
it drives me nuts.
Like, I mean, me and you talked about it before, Rick. Paul, did you ever read Scoops back in the day? Like,
yes.
Scoops was pretty legit.
Mhm.
I mean,
I do feel like wrestling media in like the late 90s, early 2000s was probably better.
Yeah, because I mean, that guy, didn't he work for I don't know if he worked for the New York Times, but he worked for like a New York newspaper. I think his name was Al Isaacs. I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, I do recall something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but
I want to say he worked for the. I'm now you're like, man, this is like a repressed memory,
right?
Wow. Maybe it was the New York Post.
It was one of them.
Yeah,
but he had like legit credential.
Yes. I want to say it was the Post, and I'm happy to be proven wrong. But yeah, like there's this period where. Yeah, late 90s, like wrestling journalism is a bit better, and it's had moved away from just like Meltzer doing like the dirt sheets, and there was an attempt to kind of cover something that like was really in the cultural zeitgeist, and then that was like the halcyon days of the internet too, right? So
right.
Well, at that time, wrestling was like, it was so big that like legitimate news was covering. Like when I say legitimate news, I mean like legitimate entertainment news, but still legitimate news. Like Entertainment Weekly or whoever, Variety was like Rolling Stone. Like they would cover wrestling because it was just so popular. But they were at least had some sort of standards versus what we have today.
But were they really like reporting news or just like events? Like if The Rock would be on the red carpet for the Grammys,
I think it was more
something.
events. It was more of like, it wasn't like, oh, this guy's signing with this company or this people are mad at whoever backstage. It was more like, this is what's happening, this is what's coming up, or maybe like an interview with Stone Cold or something. But it wasn't like, it wasn't the rumor mongering stuff we hear today. That's another thing I want. Go ahead.
It was still separate from like being too ingrained in the business itself, right?
Yeah.
Like it was like, we'll have Stone Cold on. I think it was generally more like an entertainment pop culture acceptance of wrestling than too.
True.
But and now there still exists that, but I think it's way more, I don't know, sanitized or something. I can't put my finger on what the difference is exactly, but And maybe that goes back to your point, Josh. Like now the WWE, I can't talk today, has the monopoly. Like they've kind of like torched the entire wrestling journalism industry to like make it like have to spin off into like we have to deal with rumor and rumor mongering because we're not. One thing that Jim Cornette said recently on one of his podcasts was like, of course the Punk thing was a surprise because the WWE doesn't release the stuff to Meltzer that other people do, and they can keep that information hidden and throw like deflections to if anyone is talking to them. It's like, yeah, oh yeah, we're not hiring him, and they publish it. Like they can work the system because they know they're desperate for any information whatsoever to give this appearance of legitimacy. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of truth to that.
I feel like it must be so easy as a wrestler or especially a wrestling company to work the wrestling media.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right. You kind of just tell them anything.
Right.
And they just want to hear it. Like they want to report something. Like they have a daily newsletter or a daily blog post or a daily podcast or whatever to put out, and they need something in it. So if you can tell them, oh, I think, we're going to have 18 pay-per-views this year instead of 12, they'll publish that. And then you don't actually have to have 18. You could just still have 12 and it won't really matter. And that's like a banal example of how easily I'm sure you could work them if you really wanted to.
And like, I mean, as we said at the very, very beginning, like and until there is a standard, why wouldn't you work them? Because if you can control your company's narrative to the end of time, do it. It's like, I think it was, I can't remember who it was in AEW, but it could have been Sting. Like the network got mad because it was kept a secret until like moments before they came out. Like, I get that you would want to advertise that, but at the same time, you can't keep everything. I mean, there's some things that are better kept from people. And
I do think that was the birth of the Tony Khan big announcement, though, because they want to be able to promote, oh, something's happening on Dynamite, pay attention, watch this week. But they still want it to be a surprise.
Yeah, like, it's so weird. Like,
but again, that doesn't happen with anything else. Like any other TV show,
right?
Like they don't. If it's a reality show, again, I don't know modern reality shows, but I know like Survivor, say,
right?
And something shocking is going to happen on Survivor. You might say something shocking is going to happen on Survivor tonight. Watch it. You don't. Mm-hmm. But you don't say, oh yeah, Tim gets kicked off. Make sure you watch that show. Like, right. No, you don't do that because you're wrecking the show.
Right.
So why does wrestling do it?
Again, because it's like, I don't know. It's like an odd teenager trying to fit in. Like it doesn't know where it belongs, but it's trying everything.
Well, one thing that was kind of eye-opening, not eye-opening, but kind of obviously showed how bad wrestling media is when all the Vince McMahon stuff came out, the sexual harassment stuff and the lawsuits and all that. Like that wasn't the wrestling media that
right
that at all.
That was Entertainment.
That was like the Wall Street Journal and
Wall Street Journal. Yeah.
That was like legitimate news agencies. And then then Meltzer and Sean Ross Sapp jumped on to be like, oh yeah, I heard this, blah blah blah. If someone said this backstage, but like you clearly, maybe your sources are random workers in the company, but you don't do journalism, because if you had done actual journalism, you would be the ones breaking this news, not actual journalists.
Well, yeah. And like, again,
they don't, what I'm saying is they don't do investigative reporting. They don't like look into things. They just hear from one of the 10 guys they know in the company that something happened, and then they just repeat that.
And the sad part is those 10 guys that they know in the company, whenever real journalists come, they spill their guts to them because they respect those journalists and they know if it's Meltzer or Sean Ross Sapp, they could be like, oh yeah, Freddy Krueger's coming tonight. Okay.
They know they can work them.
Right. So it's like, again, it's like, oh, that guy's he's a legit journalist. So I have to be like, I can't be in character.
It is a weird wrestling thing that exists that taints the media, because when you see CM Punk talking about wrestling, it might be in character, it might not be in character, it might be half in character, it might be half real, right? You don't know when it's CM Punk and when it's Phil Brooks, and you don't know what he's necessarily. But like, if you hear any actor talking about the new movie that they're in, they're not in character.
Right. Yeah.
They're being themselves, and they're like, oh yeah, this scene was difficult to film, and I worked with this coworker, and they were really nice. Like they're not pretending that the movie is their life or the TV show is their, but like wrestlers are.
Yeah.
That's
wow. I never thought of it that way.
So that's like an innate issue with reporting wrestling then, because they're in kayfabe half the time.
True. Well, on that note, I'll bring this up. I've asked Rick this before, Paul, so I'll ask you.
Sure.
Whenever wrestling wanted to transform itself from wrestling to quote unquote sports entertainment, do you think that was the wrong branding and they should have just called it performance art? Because then it would have been respected as like, oh, they're performance artists. They're not sports entertainers.
I mean, yeah. I mean, in hindsight, that makes sense to me.
Right.
And that's how I defend my interest in this, is like, it's performance art. And it's a level of performance art that maybe performative art might be a better word, but like it, because of what Rick just said, like, you don't know what's real and what's staged. And this is different than, hey, here's Dwayne Johnson appearing in this new movie. Hey, Dwayne, how was your weekend? Versus here's The Rock, in air quotes, right? Like, and it's such a fascinating element to me. And of course, like, they don't do it. I've never really believed so much of like, it has to be kayfabe. Like, I think kayfabe works on some level, but I think people have always known it's performance art. I don't think that's anything new. I don't think people are that stupid.
Okay.
But
I forget who it was. I think it might have been Shawn Michaels or someone who said, as soon as you see an Irish whip, you know it's not real. Because why is he bouncing off the ropes and running back to you? Right? Like, obviously. So it takes a lot to believe that anyone ever really thought this was real.
But I think there's a point, like, in the kayfabe era of selling it as, this is legit, even though people knew it wasn't legit. I think tarnishes it and never really shake the carny aspect of it. And maybe with the sports entertainment, I mean, it promotes the entertainment aspect of wrestling, but makes it even more ludicrous. And less believable and less serious. And I think the problem with that really has been, well, like, it's really downplayed how freaking dangerous this thing has been, and how damaging it's been to wrestlers without a union and no protection from Vince McMahon, right? And to me, and now I'm just spitballing here, maybe that's like part of the inherent danger of the lack of wrestling journalism. What Rick, you just said, like, when the stuff about McMahon is discovered or reported in the New York Times and in the Washington Post, it's real journalists doing that. It's not wrestling journalists. And I was thinking about a writer like Katie Strang, who's done all this work in exposing abuse scandals in hockey and toxic work environments with the Arizona Coyotes, and doing real journalism and having advocacy for players and the people that have been abused. And if you're a journalist and you don't call out someone who has had, how long has McMahon been running the WWE? Like 40, 50 years.
Yeah, like 40 something years. Yeah.
And because you're so enamored with whether or not CM Punk told William Regal he was a jerk to his face, then what are we doing here? Like, then like you're just part of the performance. And
I mean, that's true. They are part of the performance because we all read it, right? We all say it's dumb and irresponsible. We all read Meltzer and Sean Ross Sapp and Reddit and whatever. Like we all read it, and we all like being worked, right? Like if you think that if say Punk was, like we were saying, if Punk was the devil, in AEW, if we were worked to that point, like we would love it. We would think it was great. Like we would be excited.
Right.
So is it that wrestling fans want to be worked and want to not have real journalism? Because if you had real journalism, it would tell you specifically this person's contract lasts for this many years and it ends on this specific date, which you rarely get. You get Sean Ross Sapp going, it ends sometime in 2024, which like doesn't tell you anything. Is it because we want the work and we want the surprise? We want like Jay White to show up at AEW and be like, I didn't even know that he left New Japan. Like, do we want that? And that's why we don't. I'm saying we as like a wrestling audience,
right?
Not us specifically. Is that why the wrestling audience doesn't push for better journalism? Because we kind of want to be worked.
I mean, I could totally see that. I mean, when AEW started and them just running the media scrums afterwards, like that was like foreign to me, like because WWE didn't do it. And like that's how real sports work. Like, after a boxing match or after a Pens game or, so when AEW did that to me, that was like, oh, they're going to try to like legitimize the product by making it more like a real sport with a post pay-per-view media scrum and blah, blah, blah. Now they do that with like with the wrestling media, but it's done in the real way. It's not like kayfabed. It's weird.
But it is kind of because like
those
the press conferences are always odd because you never know.
That's true.
Or like they still act like
right.
They won a match, right? Like MJF doesn't come out and say like that was a really good performance. We worked on that for 6 hours before the show, and I'm surprised that spot came off well. Like he doesn't say that. They still act like there was an actual
fight.
Like they had an actual fight, which is obviously not what happened. So even those, which are
they're pseudo real.
Yeah, they're still not real, right? They're still.
Wow, this is so intriguing.
So why? I mean, that was what I was going to ask earlier. Is why do we all still? I read it. Like I complain about wrestling media more than most, I think. But I'm like on Reddit 50 times a day, wanting to see what's going on. Like we all still read it. Why do we still read it if it's so bad?
I think it's like a bad movie to me. I enjoy it. Like the more absurd it is, the happier it makes me. Like whenever you get a headline like so and so may or may not have been here or there or upside down or inside out, like I'm like, that's awesome. That's one sentence just said everything ever. I'm so excited about it. Like they're wordsmiths and it's amazing. And I like it entertains me. So I mean, I feel that I can filter out, a majority of it, but I mean, I still like to fall for things too. If I get worked or if I live on air, I claimed that Johnny Gargano was going to be at the AEW pay-per-view as he was on Raw and Rick was watching it. So, I mean, sometimes you just gotta, I put the hammer guaranteed down on that one. So yeah, sometimes you gotta just play along too.
I mean, I do kind of like the work aspect of it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think there's like kind of like what we've been saying. Like there's a want to be worked, right? And there's having watched Raw for the first time in I don't know 10, 11 years the other week. Like there's like maybe like a weird nostalgia factor for like I want to get lost in like the the narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to have like an additional aspect of the myth being thrown over me or whatever. It is kind of like a bad movie. The more I think about it, I like that. I like that comparison, Josh. I think
Yeah.
and we're the robots in Mystery Science Theater 3000, just like pointing
Right.
out, like, what, really? Okay, sure.
Yeah. Well,
And I mean, the
great
backstage stuff is more so in wrestling than anywhere else, is part of it, right? Like maybe it stems over from like the Monday Night War stuff, but like nothing was more exciting than when like someone switched between shows,
Yeah.
right? Like that was the greatest thing that happened
Unreal.
ever. And like once in a while you get, and I mean now it's gone too far to the point where it's annoying. This is my shot at the Young Bucks. But like it was fun in the 90s when like, Bischoff or Austin or Vince or someone would say something, you're like, oh, I know what he's talking about. He's talking about this real thing that happened backstage, right? Like that's fun. That's cool. Like I know that thing and he talked about it. And now I feel like I'm like part of this thing, right? So we all kind of want that because it's fun, but it's also annoying. Like I love reading wrestling media because it's fun and I want to know stuff and I like knowing things and whatever. But in the same sense, every time I read it, I'm like, this is so dumb. Why am I paying attention to this? Right? Like and there's a part where that I don't want to know, right? Like we talked before the show about how Sean Ross Sapp tweeted that GIF of Paige at the time before she debuted in AEW. And I remember being annoyed, being like, oh, I wish I didn't read his Twitter feed because that would have been cooler. Like to have to like completely forget that she even was a possibility to show up in AEW and then have her show up. That would have been really cool. And I was annoyed that didn't happen. But in the same sense, I still was looking at Sean Ross Sapp's Twitter feed when, like, if I really wanted to know nothing, I could just know nothing.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Like us as fans, like we're pretty guilty. Like every time WWE lays people off, what's the first thing we do? We count 90 days ahead and figure out who's going to be on the next edition of AEW. Like, so yeah, like we as fans also have to be a little more, I don't want to say careful, but I don't know. We just have to be mindful too, because we're just as guilty. Because whenever Ziggler got him and Ali when they in that last round of firings, like I was literally like, oh, December 20th. Oh, it's a Wednesday. That's probably when they're gonna.
Which is, I mean, why sometimes when you do get worked, it's so cool. Like when even there was some rumors about CM Punk going to WWE, but like if there were none whatsoever, if you didn't know he got fired from AEW. Like say no one knew he just wasn't on AEW, and then that would be incredible if that happened, right? But I mean that never happens.
Well, Rick Rude was on Nitro and Raw on the same night.
Yeah, like that kind of stuff won't happen now because there's always some sort of reporting about like But it would be really cool to like not know that Jay White's contract expired. If you just had no idea and then he showed up in AEW, that'd be super cool.
Oh. That would be. I'd beat my head off the wall. That'd have been incredible.
So like we all do kind of want that, like. But if we all want to be worked, why are we reading it? Because the easiest way to be worked is to not read it.
Right.
Do you think so? Here's my sort of hot take in the time I have left is I really do think now, as I'm kind of like thinking about the whole conversation, the Monday Night Wars have ruined us. I think I think like the idea of going back to like the cable company or TNT is mad that they didn't get an announcement Sting is going to arrive, right? You can't promote that. Well, that's kind of like something that you're saving, like you're doing a shock return on like a non-pay-per-view, right? Was it a Dynamite he showed up on? I can't remember. But let's just say it was, right? Then that's something straight out of like Nitro versus Raw, right? And then like maybe this has like because of the internet and this desire to, we have to know who's going to show up on Raw or Nitro or what they're referencing. It's just cemented kind of bad booking and cemented this like need to know that we want to be shocked and we want to be surprised. We also want to know how the sausage is made, but we don't want to know how the sausage is made too much because
That's
we get uncomfortable. And this is like we're in this vicious cycle. And I blame Eric Bischoff. I'm gonna.
I never thought about blaming Eric Bischoff, but you're right. I do blame Eric Bischoff.
It's how we get through life.
Yeah, that's you could blame Eric Bischoff for anything.
Who started World War II? It was Eric Bischoff.
Eric Bischoff.
So we'll try to end on a hopeful note. Is there fixing it? Is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse? Is it going to just disappear? Right, like that would be fine. Is there any? Is it? In my mind, it's only getting worse. It's just going to be more and more. Anyone can start anything because Meltzer's not a journalist as far as I know. I don't know his qualifications, but he just started his own newsletter, 40 years ago, and now he's the guy. And Sean Ross Sapp is just a guy who works for a website. Like Fightful is nothing. It's just a website, right? It just started. It's not
right.
It's nothing. So anyone can start anything. Like I think you mentioned this before. We could be wrestling media. Like I have a journalism degree. I have a website and a podcast. There you go. I'm wrestling media, but I'm not. Like I'm clearly not.
Right.
But why aren't I? Really? Like I could be if I wanted to be. So I think it's only going to get worse because there's only going to be more people who start websites and start blogs, and you might hear Fightful reported something, and right now you might put more stock into that because Fightful has a reputation, whereas bestwrestlingbiz.net has no reputation.
Mm-hmm.
But is there going to be a time when like, oh, which one was the one that had the reputation? Was it Fightful? Was it Fighting? Was it FightNet? Like, and then it all just kind of blurs together as anyone can say anything and everyone believes it, and it just gets worse.
Well, I'll play devil's advocate, and I'll say that if it goes down that path, it will eventually work itself out the way that sports blogging worked itself out. Like at first, it was fringe. It was not accepted by any media. It was just a bunch of kids on the internet. And like now bloggers work for teams. Teams have their own blogs. So if wrestling media continues down that route, I think it'll be in the long run better, but it's going to have to go through the mud before it gets to the grass on the other side.
Part of the reason other media, like sports media, sports blogs, sports Twitter feeds, whatever, got legitimized was because there was some sort of overarching source, right? Like, there was an ESPN or a TSN or a Sportsnet or whoever who you could count as the real media. And then if my hockey Twitter feed broke some news and Bob McKenzie at TSN was like, oh yeah, he did have that information, he was right, that would legitimize me because he's already legitimate.
True.
But there's no legitimate wrestling source to legitimize anyone. So will it ever be legitimized?
I do see hope. There are writers. The ESPN has had more coverage of wrestling. David Shoemaker is still writing, as far as I know, and like I miss reading his pieces on Grantland. Like, so there are people I think trying to pull whatever wrestling journalism is out of the muck. Right. It's just right now, they're hard to access, right? And there might be one or two ESPN reports on wrestling, but I've read them and they're pretty good. They're journalistic and they cite their sources. And
speaking of which, I don't want to cut you off, but remember a couple days ago, Sports Illustrated reported that Okada's contract was running out.
Yeah, this is great.
And then Sean Ross Sapp tweeted, I can confirm that Sports Illustrated was correct. I'm like, no one needed you to confirm that. They're Sports Illustrated. Right. You don't need to confirm that. They're Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, it was already confirmed when they tweeted it out.
Right, by the fact that they wrote an article and published it. Like, you don't need to confirm that. That's like That's like if Joe Biden gave a speech and I came out and was like, I can confirm that Joe Biden gave a speech. Yeah, we all know that. We saw him do it. Right? Like,
This is absolutely true. I had a meeting with a student, and the student is doing research on food deserts and wants to argue that food deserts are bad and not having food hurts people. And I was like, you don't need to report that. That's like, I think people know that's the case.
yeah.
But what was my point? So Joe Biden, Rick is Joe Biden.
There still are some people doing legitimate news.
Yeah, there are. And I think they're getting drowned out. And it's just like, it's easier to have 45 vague tweets about coming up next in Fightful Select versus here's a 5,000 word ESPN article about,
right. True.
You know, and I think I'm hopeful, but also like realistic. And I'm not sure. I maybe the entire system's going to completely fall apart at some point. And
I feel like real media, not wrestling media, is in trouble for that same reason, that it's easier to just, publish whatever or do an opinion piece than it is to do investigative work. That's hard and takes time and money. And I think if real media is going to suffer, wrestling media is already worse. So if actual media is going to get worse, wrestling media can only get worse than that, unless there is, as Blasco pointed out, that there is a tipping point where eventually people are going to be like, no, I don't want random vague stuff from some random Twitter account. I want actual news, and that like the market will demand that it's covered properly.
And that's like, you vote with your wallet. So if people stop subscribing, they'll have to change their ways. So, hopefully that would work, but they could also just go away and start something else. I don't know. It's such in like anything when it comes to pro wrestling, you can literally say anything and it's possible. It's the weirdest industry.
Is it because wrestling's so weird? Like the fact that Cody and Jade and CM Punk are all in WWE and Adam Copeland Edge is in AEW. Like the fact that happened, is because that you would never expected years ago.
Yeah,
because it's so weird and anything can happen. Is that why wrestling media is just like, it's just following that weirdness where like that doesn't happen in anything else.
Yeah, and then wrestling buys into that. Like, again, why wouldn't you? Like, yes, if anything can happen here, if we're just carnies that are working everybody, okay, be a rube. Like,
right?
So it's their fault too. Interesting conversation tonight.
I agree.
Fun.
Yeah.
So just because we didn't take enough shots at them yet, that source saying that the wrestlers backstage are mad at the VP being fired, that's the Young Bucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
Because who else would care?
See, if anybody, I would say it would. If anybody, I would say it would be Jarrett, because the Bucks don't know anything about TV. That's just me. They were Japan wrestlers.
If he's a VP and they're VPs, they would probably associate with him more than any other.
Well, that's true too.
Wrestler would.
Huh.
But Jarrett's a possibility.
I see. I would have guessed it would have been more production people, not a wrestler, because a wrestler doesn't give.
Yeah, they don't care. But like,
right.
if the report is people backstage are upset, that came from someone who either is backstage or knows people backstage.
Oh, you're saying that the Bucks said that people were upset?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were saying that the Bucks were upset that he was fired. Oh,
no, I'm saying the Bucks are the ones who talked to Meltzer about it.
Oh, 1,000% it's them. Like, yeah, like of course they're gonna do that. I would do that. It's fun. I mean, yeah, if you could literally just send a text message to somebody and make the internet explode 10 seconds later, who wouldn't do that?
I honestly think like the Bucks could tell Meltzer anything and he would support it.
Exactly. It's like, why wouldn't you? Like, just to see the world burn, it'd be great. Like, hey, say this. Okay. And then he tweets out that, AEW changes their name to the World's Greatest Wrestling Federation. And you're
Right.
like, ah.
That's not what I said at all. That's not what I tweeted.
Yeah, no, he would never say AEW is changing its name. He would say sources backstage are telling
True.
me that there's a possibility that AEW may be looking
May
into
or
the
may not.
prospect of may or may not changing its name. Plans may change.
Sources confirmed.
Yes, then Sean Ross Sapp would say, my sources confirm the same thing.
Oh, wrestling journalism.
Good
It's
time.
it's
Good
a thing.
That's about all it is, but yeah, it's a thing. Well, on that note, does anybody have any final thoughts?
Well, we've all been banned by Sean Ross Stapp, so
Mhm.
you know, I look forward to being banned by Meltzer at some point if he's ever on Blue Sky. I don't know. So we'll see.
Yay. Rick, you have anything?
No, I'm good. I like
Okay.
this. This is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a little different. A lot of fun. Just to have a general open conversation on one topic. It was a lot of fun. What do you think, Biddy? Sick.
Vinny's okay, by the way, everyone.
He's
I know
okay.
I know she hasn't been on, but she's fine. People reached out asking about her cat. Her cat is doing better. So
Yes, her cat is doing better.
she sends her thank yous for requests.
She was here for 23 seconds tonight. She's still logged on. She just the past hour and minutes hasn't said anything. That's
There
all.
you go.
It was a very, very short time in the Royal Rumble, and unfortunately,
Yes. Anyways. on
Like,
that-
share, subscribe,
yes.
follow, tweet,
Yeah.
or X, or I don't know.
Yeah. And
If you
and
want,
we'll,
we're wrestling media, so you should just verify
Mhm.
that we're
Right.
doing a great job.
and
hey, I mentioned wrestling in my book, so hey, I'm
nice.
You're a published author, so that's
I'm
even
a
better.
published author, baby.
There
Woo!
you go.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're very legitimate.
That is true.
I mean, we're equally legitimate.
Equally legitimate.
I mean,
take
literally,
that.
we are. We're equally legitimate to anyone else.
Can we
That's-
print T-shirts? Can we print T-shirts just say equally legitimate? I like that.
That's sick.
Yeah, that'd be great. I want those.
That's a sick band name too.
From what I've learned is you start as a t-shirt producing company, then you become a wrestling company. I figure that works, so we can try it.
That would be sick. I'd grow a mustache like McMahon. That'd give me a reason to have a mustache. It's awesome.
Great.
That's the greatest mustache in the history of. I mean, that thing's awesome.
What is he thinking? Like, honestly,
He's a supervillain.
he is.
I mean,
he looks like a supervillain.
Yeah, I mean that's
He's-
what he is.
I guess he's just leaning in. He's just leaning into the supervillain.
What a
When the
human.
gimmick works, you gotta stick with it. You know?
It's true. Live
Right.
the gimmick. Live the gimmick.
There you go.
Anyways, on that note, we will see you next week. Bye bye.